Alright, pardon the mess. I have quite a number of projects going on right now. Got carburetor overhauls, which we're going to talk about in this video. I've got electrical, got bathroom remodeling. You know, I just have quite a bit going on, and then my trimmer started acting up. So let's talk about that carburetor repair. So I've had the HHT35S for, oh gosh, it's got to be at least a decade. I'm not kidding, at least 10 years. And I started it up and it would only run on half choke, and even at half choke it would cut out. It would start, rev right up, and cut out. So it's like only the fuel that was in that I pumped into the carburetor ran the carburetor for a little while. So definitely had some issues. Here they are, these gaskets, but they are unique in a way because it is actually two gaskets put together, so you have to orient them correctly. And there's a top and a bottom. And the 25S is different from the 35S. The carburetors are different. And then I do not know anything about the UMK31S, or no, I'm sorry, the UMK 400 series. It's what, a 422 and a 432, something like that. And also in the other shop manual is the HHT31S. So if you don't have either the HHT25S or the HHT35S, which is this shop manual, you'll have to get the other shop manual. And I looked online, and they're still in 2023, September, October time frame of 2023. They're still $38.95. Now you pay tax if there's tax in your state, but shipping is free, so there's no reason not to get a shop manual. And now I'm going to show you how to remove the carburetor if you don't have a shop manual, or even if you do. Alright, you're going to need to stabilize your engine. So I have mine on the toolbox pull-out tray over there. And also you're going to need to make sure your oil doesn't leak out. What I mean by that is it's going to be on its side. At least I recommend that. It's a good time to change the oil. Maybe drain it out first. So what I mean by that, it is best to work on it straight down like that. Alright, step one is to take breaks often so your coffee doesn't get cold. Very important. Alright, we're going to be taking the cover off of here. This can be quite oily, so you want to watch for that. Alright, what I like to do is I can use a number 2 Phillips. But I like to break loose the ground first, because that thing can be on there really, really tight. And you definitely do not want to foul that screw up. So I'll take the ground off. Then using a number 4 Allen, there's 2 socket head cap screws on the bottom we'll take off. Note they're different sizes. The short one is highly visible. It's going on the left, and the long one goes in the center, on the center line or on the right. Now we can take our two carburetor mounting screws off. Be sure to drop one on the floor and not be able to find it and ruin your day. Don't forget to do that. Alright, this guy should just come right off. So, I removed the cover, just the housing and the choke cover. Now, this plate will come off. I just made a joke about the nut dropping on the floor and disappearing. That guy is really what you want to watch. It looks like it's captured in there, but believe me, they will escape. That plate will escape and jump out of there and disappear. And you do not want that to happen. And then also be careful your torque limiters. That's what these metal pieces do. So when the nut is tightened down onto the stud, everything goes metal to metal and you can't like squish the plastic basically. So it all goes solid. So just be careful about that and ask me how I know. Alright, your carburetor should come off, but it won't. And that reason is the fuel lines. So let's take a look at those. So the clear hose, blue hose, yellow hose, I recommend Tygon tubing only, even though it's a return vent. That is just going to come off. However, over time it becomes very stiff. It can also crack even though it's Tygon tubing. Like I said, this is over 10 years old and it's the original. It's just stiff. I didn't find any cracks or anything. But what you need to do before you can remove the carburetor is take this clip off and remove the fuel line, which is actually kind of tough. Also notice there's a routing clip right here, and notice that the fuel line went in last and the return line went in first. I highly recommend that. Let's see, if I still don't have enough room to pull it out, I need to take the fuel line off like I was saying earlier. And it is a fun job. I have these curved pliers that really help. And there again, you're gonna see that I was off camera, of course. That my curved pliers seem to have worked the best on this task. And that's kind of tough too. Alright, coffee. Now your carburetor's not free yet. You have to take the throttle cable off. I use two 10mm wrenches, and I'll show you a little trick. At least I think it's beneficial. And the trick is hold the front one still, get on the flats, loosen the back one, just loosen that one. There we go. Then when you put it back on, you just put it on tight like that and tighten the back one up, and you're already set. Your length is set. To remove it, I highly recommend that you push it forward. I used the trigger to help me, and then it popped right out. And of course, you know how cables are, they have a little end on them. If you look, that is just a slot, and that has a place for the cable to rest into. So you can put it in backwards, and if you do put it in backwards, my little trick I just showed you here where I did not move the front nut, it won't work because you'll actually be throttle on. So just reassemble it correctly so that the stop goes in the hole. All right, after all of that, your carburetor is free. Yay! All right, now let's look at what the problem was. Honda says 3 times in the manual about this gasket just to put a new one in every time. And you can see this one's new. Again, I've already done the work, but I'm going to go through it. Oh, still a little bit of gasoline in there. All right, when I worked in industry, we had to wear protective clothing. And for our hands, we always put on cotton gloves before we put on our nitrile gloves. When I was working, they were made out of other material, but that allows the gloves to slide on and slide off very easily, because you know, you were dressing out in protective clothing. We actually wore 2 pair of vinyl gloves. Now they're nitrile, but anyway. And if your hands become sweaty, it's very easy to take the gloves on and off. All right, that's my tip. All right, let's look at the carburetor. There are some details you want to pay attention to. Let's see, it's going to be on there like this. So this is the intake. This is the output where the fuel air mixture goes into the engine. Throttle on top, primer on the bottom. So when you lift this up, see the primer on the bottom, you'll see the shape. You'll also see these, I think they're manufacturing holes for some reason, and then they plug them up with a ball bearing to stop, you know, to make them solid. So there's 2, they line up. On the other side, there is one, but it's off to the side. You cannot flip it around because this would interfere with the fuel line. But just be aware of the orientation. So we're going to take our 4 screws off. I highly recommend manually do it, and you can press on it really hard, press it together and turn it. I recommend turning all 4, making sure all 4 are started so you're not fighting one. I cannot tell you how many of these screws I've destroyed over the years learning all this stuff. But if you destroy that screw, you know, you're going to have to get some pliers and do all kinds of crazy things that you really shouldn't need to do because you did it correctly. All right, the 4 screws are identical, so there's no worries there. However, once those 4 screws are out, the entire assembly comes apart. So be careful because you're maintaining your orientation. Here, that's how it was on the engine. So let's take it apart. All right, the first piece off is the bulb, and it's stained yellow from years of gasoline, so I'm going to replace that. Just put my new one in there. Next is the body, the primer body. All right, there's no moving parts or things to worry about as far as wear is concerned. Then your first set of gaskets. I'll talk about those in a minute. So here are your first set of gaskets. So I'm going to put my screws in just as a part of this reassembly, disassembly, reassembly to help keep everything in place. So the way I'm presenting this, is assembling from the bottom up. So your first gasket is going to be your metering diaphragm, 16013-Z0H-003. Now it does go on in a certain way, however, it would be extremely difficult for you to put this on upside down. It'll fit in the 4 screw holes, but you'll see the other holes will not line up. And of course, if you put it in backwards, you know, they'll just be out of place. Here, let me show you. So with the pin down and the large metal diaphragm up, we'll set it into position. Here, let me do that off camera. Here we go. Make sure that's in. All right, next is your metering diaphragm gasket, which is 16010ZM3-004, and it looks like this. And again, not so much the 4 mounting holes, because you can, you know, flip it over or put it in backwards. However, this hole here will line up, and this hole here will line up when you look at it. And I know it's difficult to see because it's black on black, my apologies, but you see there's a hole to the left and a hole to the right, and they're not on center line. So when you put this gasket in, it's going to line up with the holes. All right, next on the pump body to the metering lever right here, that drop from the body to the top of the lever should be 1.1 to 1.5 millimeters. So if you didn't touch it, mess with it, or otherwise ruin it, shouldn't have a problem. Oops, I thought the camera was on. All right, so I assembled that, and actually it's kind of backwards. I'm doing this for demonstration purposes, so, you know, so that the screws don't keep sliding out and you have a big mess everywhere and everything. You might want to start your assembly at the main body and go up. Keep things from falling out all over the place. Alright, within the carburetor body there is the main jet right here. I don't want to lose that spring. It's oriented in a certain way too. So you can, it says to blow it out with air. If I can stay on camera. It says to blow it out with air, but I did not do that. I run everything through the sonic cleaner, and I've been thoroughly happy with that. You can see how clean it is for the new gasket. So you want to remove the main jet and replace the O-ring in there. Alright, the tiny little O-ring is part number 16025-ZM3-004. And over the bench, so I don't look at it, you can see there's a little spot right here on the right. You can get your pick underneath there to get it out. There is your O-ring. You can pick it out, put the new one in. I highly recommend that. And there's the smallest jet in the world. Make sure that's clear. Just get it started and push it in place. It'll hold. Notice it's up a little bit. That's normal. All right. Now the 2 gaskets that go between the pump body and the carburetor. The number is extremely similar to the other gasket, but it's not. It is 16014 ZM3-004. The other gasket on the lower part of the body is a different number. One number is different, so they're shaped so differently, it's extremely difficult to get them confused, in my opinion. Again, if you look at the shape, you will not mess up on your orientation. So you have a cutout that goes here. And you have this cutout. Just match them up. And you should not have a problem. Alright, we'll get the pump diaphragm on there. And again, like I said, it's best to assemble them starting with the carburetor body as opposed to backwards like I'm doing it for the demo. Alright, our last gasket, the pump gasket, is 16011Z0H013. And that is the pump gasket. Again, it's oriented in such a way where you really can't mess up. Everything will line up. Alright, before we put our two halves together, the pump and the carburetor, there's a spring that goes in between. And the way the spring is oriented, there is a small end and a large end. The small end goes towards the pump, and the large end goes into the carburetor, sitting in that little silver circle there. So that will go together like that. So let me screw it down. Remember, nothing should be forced. You should not have to force anything in place. All the screws should go in there nice and easy. Should be able to turn them all down by hand and then give them a nice tight, good and tight finish. Alright, don't be afraid to tighten them all the way down. You should just be able to squeeze the two together, turn the screwdriver, and nothing moves. Just put it all together. Alright, for reassembly, they say use a new gasket every time, and that number is 16221-Z0Z-000. I'm replacing my tubing because it is, 10 years old, hard. I've disassembled everything. I might as well replace it. That is part number 17702-Z0H-003. Again, when you go to Amazing's website and purchase a carburetor for 20 bucks, sometimes they throw in a lot of stuff like this. If the tubing's not Tygon, it may be a problem. Believe me. You're going to be hating life when you come back the next year and your trimmer doesn't work because the line has become real brittle just over that one season and has developed cracks in it. Now this is a return line, it's not as critical, but still. Alright, I wanted to replace my fuel filter too, kind of just normal maintenance. In order to get this plug out, it's really, you can see it's pretty thick and difficult. I recommend taking out the return line. I'm replacing it anyway. Then you can push on it. If I can get on camera, let me bring it close to the camera. Then you can push on it and collapse that area where the fuel line goes through and bring it up. Get your screwdriver in there, bring it up, and then you can pull the entire assembly out and replace your filter. Alright, don't forget to inspect your line, whether it was cracked or you damaged it taking the filter off, either one. Make sure it's acceptable. Cut it off if need be. Cutting off a little 1/4 inch never hurt anything. Alright, new filter, and this little clamp right here is a bit of pain in the butt, but you can wiggle it on there. Now for reassembly, I recommend the opposite. Go ahead and put your hose back in, your return hose, and then set it in place. Gonna have to work it in, but it shouldn't be too bad. And remember how it was oriented. The return hose was on the outside, but it goes to the inside of the retaining clip up here. Well, my hands are going to be in the way, but I just wanted to show you that it goes in fairly easily. Give it a little push with the screwdriver. And it'll just set itself right in place. Should you decide to replace the breather tube, that is part number 15721-Z0Z-000. Also note its orientation. There is a short end and a long end. Short end is to the engine, long end is out towards the carburetor. If you want to replace your O-ring here, there are two different ones, so be careful, and they are different. So the larger one, the 91301-ZM3-000, is going to go on the outside. The smaller one, the 12.3 by 2.4, 91308-Z3E-000, goes on the inside. Okay, before mounting the carburetor, you want to put on your fuel lines. So you want to orient this correctly. So your fuel line in goes on the curved one. And we'll set the clip here. Then our fuel return line, our primer line, will go on the straight one coming out the bottom. Alright, all these details are important, else you'll be fighting it. Next, you want to place your carburetor onto the mounting studs. Then you want to route your return line into the catch first, followed by the fuel line second. Alright, with your fuel lines mounted correctly, next you want to get your throttle cable. You're going to need to actuate the cable also. So let's get this actuated. Make sure it's oriented correctly. Get your cable in there. Set. And you can have your nut that you did not move, just put it in place. Then you can tighten it down and you're all set. You don't have to worry about making adjustments. Alright, while I have clearance, I'm going to put in my ground screw and the ground wire. You want that good and tight. Right, then your air cleaner case. Your two nuts, your two bolts. Alright, remember your long one goes deep. And your short one is shallow. Alright, then your air filter, don't forget to oil it up. There's a post right here. Then your air cleaner cover. It's hooked on the bottom. Those hooks go in the pins here. And that's right where we started from. Alright, well, I appreciate you taking the time to watch my video. I hope this helps someone. Have a great day.